Along with Witchfinder General and Blood on Satan's Claw, The Wicker Man completes the folk horror triad known as the Unholy Trinity that is essential viewing for anyone interested in the genre. Many modern folk horrors have their roots firmly planted in these three films. The Wicker Man follows devout Christian police sergeant Howie, who is sent to the remote Scottish island of Summerisle to look for a missing child, Rowan Morrison, only to discover that the island's residents have converted to a form of paganism, and Rowan is going to be sacrificed. For the most part, this film has a very odd tone that I can imagine not being for everyone. Most of the story isn't going for scares, but a feeling of unease and bewilderment. Much of it feels like a fish-out-of-water comedy rather than the classic horror film it's spoken as. The majority of the film follows Howie exploring Summerisle and witnessing incredibly bizarre practices and rituals that deeply offend his religious beliefs. Pubgoers singing lurid songs about the landlord's daughter in front of the landlord and his daughter, group sex in a graveyard, and desecrating a church are just some of the island's favourite activities. These moments aren't particularly scary, with Woodward's fantastic bewildered performance only highlighting the ridiculousness. But they do lull Howie, and in turn the audience, into a false sense of security. He is so full of Christian righteousness that the islanders are able to lead him into their trap. But the final scene cannot be classified as anything other than horror. Thinking he's rescued Rowan from Lord Summerisle's ritual sacrifice, he inadvertently runs right into the arms of the crowd, as Rowan is in on the conspiracy and it's actually Howie they intend to sacrifice in the titular Wicker Man. This is the scene that always appears in best horror moments or best moments of British cinema, and I don't need to explain why. But let me explain why. Though his reason falls on deaf ears, I don't think Howie really believes they're genuinely going to do it until he sees his tomb, or rather his pyre, on the hilltop. But his screams and this shaky POV shot cement that this is real. When their arms start swinging as they sing "Summer is a-coming" while Howie burns alive is darkly comic and a nice summation of the film's tone. As the monument crumbles, the sun sets, completely indifferent to these people and their beliefs. The wonderfully named Edward Woodward, who you may recognise from Hot Fuzz.
If we don't come down hard on these clowns, we are going to be up to our balls in jugglers.
Plays Howie with a stern righteousness, which honestly makes him kind of unlikable. His disapproving reactions to the island's activities are great.
What?
But his performance in the finale is haunting and part of the reason why this film is so fondly remembered. But his strict conservatism is essential to counter the island's unorthodox beliefs. The island is run by Lord Summerisle, who is played by the film icon Christopher Lee. His film career spanned nearly 7 decades, and his looming height and deep voice made him one of the most recognisable screen actors. He's been in Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, he's worked with Tim Burton 5 times, and appeared with 3 nipples as the man with the golden gun in The Man with the Golden Gun, which also featured Wicker Man alumni Britt Ekland. But prior to The Wicker Man, he was predominantly known for his work with Hammer Horror. After playing the monster in The Curse of Frankenstein, Lee played Dracula in Hammer's gothic adaptation of the classic novel. He would reprise his role in 6 more Hammer films and would appear 3 times in other productions, where he had a wonderful moustache. But in the early 70s, Lee sought to take on a new challenge, so spoke to sleuth author Anthony Schaefer on working on a project together, which would ultimately become The Wicker Man. It's nice knowing he was so involved in the project's conception, as he later stated that this was his favourite film he'd been in. Lee plays Lord Summerisle with charm and ease, talking to Howie like a child.
They do love their divinity lessons.
But they are naked.
Naturally, it's much too dangerous to jump through the fire with your clothes on.
His calm personality and imposing figure makes him perfect casting as a cult leader, as it makes sense that these people would follow him. Summerisle explains that his grandfather bought the island when its people were struggling for food. He knew that they'd be desperate for work and that the island's fertile soil could grow exotic produce. The original citizens worked for him because he paid and fed them, but once they saw the bounty of their labour, the first Summerisle convinced them that this was due to the old gods, and gave them back freedoms the Christian church forbids, as a way of keeping them devoted and subservient. The current Summerisle says he keeps the traditions because he just enjoys the drama of it all. During the climactic ritual, he goes all out and takes it very seriously. But more importantly, it keeps him in a position of power. He lives in a lavish, stately home, is seen with various women, and has a devoted flock who will happily commit murder if their lord commands it. But as Howie says, they will turn on him when their harvest fails next year, and Summerisle has a brief look of "Shut up." I like that The Wicker Man has a very agnostic ending, with neither side having it right. Although the islanders are so devout in their faith that they're willing to burn someone alive, we never see any of the miracles that the villagers claim their rituals produce. Their bountiful harvests are just a result of the Summerisles being particularly good gardeners. And while Howie prays and screams for his god to intervene, no such help arrives. There's no sudden rainstorm to put out the fire. His cries of pain go unheard. Both religions are portrayed as what men make of them. They each have their own rituals, symbols, and zealotry. Summerisle wields his wealth and power to manipulate the islanders as their leader for personal gain. And Howie wields his faith like a badge of honour, looking down on anything he deems not up to standard, and is rude to anyone who has a different lifestyle.
Heathens. Bloody heathens.
A religious bigot as a police officer is not a good mix. The film has a dreamy 70s meets cottagecore aesthetic that I've seen on many a mood board, and it's almost entirely soundtracked by diegetic folk songs that are soft yet sinister. Folk horror is my favourite subgenre because the predominant evil is that of regular folk. In The Wicker Man, the horror comes from being a stranger in a strange town where the locals are conspiring to kill you specifically, and being burned alive. That's pretty scary too. The influence this film has had on folk horror cannot be understated. It was released in 1973 as a B-movie to Don't Look Now, which would have been a class double feature. So next year, The Wicker Man will be 50 years old. Happy birthday, you big man.